Hi everyone, welcome back to another video. I hope you are well. As you could probably read from the title, I'm creating this video to share my experience of doing a type rating on the A320. So you're probably wondering what's a type rating. So obviously every single aircraft is different and you need to familiarise yourself with the aircraft before you start flying it with passengers. So a type rating is a certification that's provided by the aviation authorities to the pilots once they've completed the testing and training of the specific aircraft, and for me in this instance it's the A320. So I'll be doing my type rating at L3Harris, and as you probably know, I did all my flight training at L3Harris, so it's really nice that I can go back to my flight school and get my type rating done there. L3Harris has some of the most state-of-the-art simulators in the world. They've got really good VFDs as well, and the instructors there are brilliant, so hopefully I'll have a good time there. So type rating usually lasts between 5 to 6 weeks, and I'll be completing mine in about roughly 5 weeks time. So type rating is split into the first 2 weeks being ground school. So in ground school, you basically learn about the whole aircraft. You learn about all the systems. You have to do a lot of self-study. You get given CBTs, which is computer-based training, and it's basically about loads of videos where it goes through every single system in depth and detail. And then throughout the day, each day you basically answer questions of each of the topics that you've learned. From what I've heard at L3Harris, what happens is the next day the instructors go through all the questions that you potentially have, and they go through the content that you learned the previous day. And within that day you also jump into the VFD. So the VFD is there to basically for you to practice your airline's SOPs and different flows, so that once you do jump into the simulator, you're ready for it. So the simulator phase is pretty much 3 weeks. My timetable is 3 days on, 3 days off. So it will start quite easily with potentially just getting used to the aircraft, doing a bit of general handling. And as the days progress on, you would get more failures and ECAM actions, and you have to deal with tricky situations in the aircraft. At the end of that, on the last day, you basically have an exam which is known as your LST, which is your license skills test. And if everything goes well, you basically you've got a type rating on the A320. So yeah, I'm starting tomorrow with L3Harris. Fingers crossed it goes well, and yeah, I'll keep you updated. So just a quick update. So it's Sunday today, and tomorrow I've got my A320 ground school tech exam tomorrow, and it consists of 112 questions. It's split into 5 sections. So you've got 76 questions, which is basically the aircraft general knowledge on the A320. You've then got 12 questions regarding limitations. You then have 8 questions regarding emergency procedures. Then you've got another 8 questions about glass cockpit, and then the final 8 questions is about the FMS itself. So yeah, I've got that tomorrow, early start. Wake up about 6, heading towards Gatwick to L3Harris. Yeah, fingers crossed it goes well, and I'll keep you updated tomorrow. Hi everyone, so yeah, today was my day 1 of my tech exam. So yeah, thankfully I passed. So as I mentioned yesterday, there was 112 questions and we had 2 hours to answer it. So yeah, there was definitely some questions that we hadn't seen before, but thankfully I passed. So tomorrow is basically part 2 of the ground school exam, and it's basically the Perth side of things. So the performance exam actually consists of 5 different parts. So it's performance, UPRT, PBN, weight and balance, and low visibility operations. So out of the 5 parts, we've actually already completed 2 parts today. So we completed the UPRT and PBN. So tomorrow we've got the performance questions, LVOs, and we've got the weight and balance. So all 3 sections consist of about 32 questions in total. So we've got about an hour to complete that. Now, some of the questions that will come up is performance related for the aircraft, for the A320, how you would like put that into your company iPad. You'll put in all the weight and balance, all the performance related factors, and you'd get the numbers for your takeoff speeds, your maximum takeoff mass, things like that. So tomorrow we'll be given an iPad, a crew iPad, where it will be, you'd obviously answer the question on paper, but you'll have the iPad to put in the different figures. So yeah, wish me luck for tomorrow. Hi guys, so it's the next day, and I'm so sorry, but I forgot to record yesterday's footage. So basically, yeah, yesterday I sat the Perth exam with LVO and weight and balance, and yeah, the exam went well. So I passed that. So now I've completed ground school,
and all my written exams are complete. So I've got a couple of days off, and we're basically going to move on to the simulator phase now. So we've got a pre-sim, which is basically a simulator where you get a feel for the aircraft, and then you've got basically 10 simulators, and it's usually 3 simulators on, 3 days off, 3 on, 3 on, like that. And at the end you have something called your LSD, which is your license skills test. So that's the day where you basically get tested. But for the next 10 simulator sessions, what's going to happen is you'll basically go through a new emergency procedure. They'll teach you some general handling. They'll try and throw some failures at you and see how you handle it, and try and learn from it. So yeah, over the next couple of days, I'll go through what's about to come. But yeah, that's it for the moment.
Hi everyone, so it's been a couple of days since I've last updated you guys. So I had the perf exam, and then I had a 3-day break. And after the 3-day break, I've had 3 simulator sessions so far. So I'm now going to basically go through what came up in each simulator session. But before that, I'm just going to go quickly through the structure of each simulator session. So we've basically given a roster from L3Harris of when we've got our simulators, and it's got a reporting time that you basically need to be here for either, let's say 6 a.m, 10 a.m, 2 p.m. And what you have to do is you have to report 1.5 hours before that reporting time, so that you can basically meet your instructor and go through what you're going to expect in each simulator session. So it's basically a brief of, as I mentioned, what's going to come up, how you're going to do things, go through the different procedures, and then you basically have a 4-hour slot. So you have 2 hours of pilot flying and then 2 hours of pilot monitoring. So you and your pilot, your sim partner, will decide who's going to go first. After you've basically completed your 2 hours of whatever responsibility you have, you then basically change roles. And after you've completed your session, you basically go into one of the rooms and you basically do a debrief. So the instructor will basically talk through what went well in the simulator session, what went bad, areas of improvement, and potentially what will come up in the next simulator session. So the first simulator session is known as pre-sim. So this is basically where you get to familiarize yourself with the aircraft, as this is your first time that you're entering the simulator. It's actually really to have a bit of fun and get used to, I guess, all the controls and everything. This is going to be your first simulator that's going to be in full motion. So this will be your first opportunity also to practice your SOPs that you've been learning throughout type rating. So obviously in the brief, the instructor will have gone through the things that you're going to expect to do. But once we basically jumped in, the first thing that instructor focused was your seating position and your arm rest position as well. It's really important that you sit correctly and how you control the side stick. Obviously in a Boeing, you've got the conventional yoke in between your legs, whereas in an Airbus, you've got the side stick. It's really important that you have the right angle. Your hand has the right angle when you're gripping this side stick. You want to make sure that you're relaxed. You want to make sure your arm is level, for example. So the instructor will actually spend a bit of time going through this, and once you find the right position, there's like a small code on the armrest. So in your future simulator sessions, as well as when you're on the line and flying the aircraft in real, you can just put that code in and you don't have to waste time faffing around with that. So yeah, that would be really good. After we did all that, we then started with just doing our SOPs, doing our checks. We didn't do a full cockpit setup. We just started at the holding point, and the first thing we really got to do was a bit of taxiing practice. So obviously the motion's on and you're taxiing and it feels like a lot's going on. You can maybe feel a bit nauseous if it's your first time having a full motion simulator. So what the instructor teaches you is how to do a 180 degrees turn on the runway. So you get a feel for it. You realize very quickly that you have to be very you have to be very soft on the tiller and not make any quick evasive actions. You have to be very, very gentle and smooth. Once you've done this a couple of times, the instructor would position you for the takeoff, and you will then basically complete a couple of takeoffs using the flight director. So you want to actually pitch up to about 15 degrees nose up. So that will be about 3 degrees per second for about 5 seconds.
and you just want to get the feel for the right amount of rotation on the side stick. It's really important that you don't obviously pull back really quick, or else you will have a very high nose angle, and then this will result, for example, in having a tail strike. But obviously you don't want to have too much nose down tendency. You just want to make sure that you're doing 3 degrees per second for about 5 seconds. So once you've done a couple of takeoffs and you feel confident, you'll go into the air, you'll start trying to do all these different flows and checks, things like this, and then you'll do a bit of general handling. The instructor will tell you, right, climb to this altitude or descend to this altitude, turn left on this heading or turn right. This will be done using, for example, the autopilot, where you'll basically control everything using the FCU, but then he will tell you to switch the autopilot off, and then you'll have to manually fly it. After you get a feel for this, you will then come in to basically do a couple of landings. So the instructor will vector you for landing. So it's really, really important from the first day that you have the right landing technique. So this session, the instructor will really try and help you understand at what time you need to flare, when you need to close the thrust levers, how to align yourself on the center line. So I guess the first pre-sim is really, really simple, and it's just so that you can get used to the aircraft, as I previously mentioned. So yeah, don't be too worried about that. Then once we completed this, we then moved on to the first official simulator session. So that's called Sim 1. So for Sim 1, we did a quick setup from taxi. So we were at the taxi, we were at the holding point, sorry, and we just did a quick setup. And this is when the instructor helped us program the FMGS, or the McDo. So we did a takeoff, and then we did something called FPV, which is flight path vector familiarization. It's also commonly known as the bird. So this is where the flight directors are switched off, and you basically fly the aircraft using the bird. It's kind of a cheating technique, I guess, if you don't have flight directors on. Once we did a bit of that, we basically had visual circuits. So obviously so far, if I was pilot flying, I've had my simulator, I've had my sim partner sitting in the other seat. But for this specific session, as we were doing visual circuit, the instructor actually sits in the captain's seat and he walks through it with you. So obviously we've never done visual circuits in a simulator, and visual circuits, you would only do this on your base training, where you would have to do 6 touch and goes. So it was really interesting seeing what to expect a couple months down the line. There was obviously a lot going on, so the instructor helped us and prompted us of when, for example, we needed to put flaps down, when we needed to do a certain check, when you needed to put the gear down. So yeah, this is basically the only day also that where you would do touch and goes. So after doing that, we went back into the sky, and then we did a couple of approaches, and this was the first time when we did go-arounds. So we were, let's say, I don't know, 400 feet above aerodrome level, and then we had to go around. So we already briefed this in the brief, and we knew what actions that we would need to take. We then did a raw data ILS with the bird, so with the flight path vector. This was something that was really different. So far, we had the flight directors assisting us coming down the approach, but this was the first time when you're having to look at your localizer and your glide slope and come down, and obviously have you're not having the auto thrust engaged and having to put a thrust yourself. And then after that, we landed the aircraft. We had done some shutdown checks. So in the previous lesson, we didn't do any shutdown checks. This time we did some shutdown checks. We did the parking check, and we secured the aircraft. So that was basically Sim 1. We then moved on to Sim 2. Sim 2, we basically did some takeoff performance and mass and balance performance data. So we basically completed this in the briefing room. So I'll show you what this is right now on the screen. So normally while flying on the line, before the doors are closed, you will receive a load sheet from the dispatcher. And as you can see from this load sheet, it gives you various information, for example, how many males, females, children, infants on board, the passenger distribution, and how much cargo we've got. So what you need to do is you need to independently compute these data and put it into the FlySmart app. So we'll open the FlySmart app, and we're going to FlySmart load sheet, and then you put the aircraft type in. We're an A320-241. Aircraft registration, we'll just go for the first one today. Flight number, I'll just make it up as 123, and we're going from Gatwick, and we are going to Manchester. So then you've pressed the load sheet app, and then you basically fill in all the details. So passengers on board. So as you can see, we've got 35 males on board today. We've then got 42 females, 8 children, and 3 infants. And now we have to do the passenger distribution. So we've got 19 passengers in Zone A. We've then got 30 passengers in Zone B. And as you can see, it's automatically calculated that it's got 36 passengers in Zone C. So that's all done. We'll go into the cargo. And for the cargo, we'll put in that we've got 1,200 kilograms of baggage in total. And it's only in cargo hold 1 that all the weight and baggage is in there. Fuel on board. Let's say we've got 5 tons on fuel on board, and trip fuel will go 3 tons. So we can then distribute the fuel, and we'll press compute, and now we get the maximum takeoff weight, we get the maximum landing weight, and the 0 fuel mass. So as you can see on the side, we've got 50.40 fuel weight, our takeoff weight is 55.2, and our landing weight is 52.2. So then this is obviously the weight and balance. Now we need to go into the performance section. So everything gets carried over automatically. So we're from Gatwick, we're on runway 26 left, we're full length. The wind outside, which we would have got from the ATIS, is 240 at 10 knots. Outside air temperature is 15 degrees Celsius. QNH is 1023. Runway condition dry. Runway condition dry. Anti-ice, it's off. The takeoff weight's already been brought across, and we're doing a takeoff CLG standard config, and climb thrust, we're just doing the climb D10, takeoff thrust is flex, and we're using flap 1 and aircon is off. So once we've pressed compute, we get given all the performance information required. So here at Gatwick on 26 left, you've got 3,255 meters available. We will only require 2,207 meters, and you've got a stop margin of 1,110 meters. So if I swipe the page, we've got our V1, VR, and V2 speeds. As we're using the full length, we've got no takeoff shift. We're doing a flap 1 setting, and it's a flex 67 takeoff. And we've got our thrust reduction, acceleration altitude, and the engine out acceleration altitude as well. So you basically take all this information and then you program it into the McDo. So what we were told is in the briefing room that we were to compute it here in the briefing room before we start the simulator session, and then once we've gone into the simulator itself, we can program this into the McDo. So we got into the simulator, and this was the first time we did a full cockpit preparation. So this is when the aircraft is a complete cold and dark. So for example, imagine you've rocked up to Gatwick and it's the first flight of the day, it's 6 a.m. You need to start from cold and dark, where basically everything's switched off and you need to go from the beginning. So we were practicing this out, and then we realized that we had a minor failure. We had an APU in op, so we had an auxiliary power in op. So APU obviously assists the aircraft in many ways, especially for example needing bleed air to obviously start the engines. So we basically had to do a ECAM drill which required engine start with the air start unit. And this can be found in the FCOM. Now, this was a very lengthy procedure to do. It took us about 15 minutes, and the instructor told us that this happens sometimes on the line, and if you're doing 4 sectors a day, you definitely know you're going to come 1 hour late potentially. So it's very important that you do it carefully and thoroughly in detail, and make sure that you don't miss out any steps. So after we basically did the start, went onto the taxiway, got to the holding point, and we did a couple of crosswind takeoffs. So it's important how you understand how to do a crosswind takeoff. Obviously, weather conditions are not always going to be perfect. So the instructor really tried to drill down on this technique, and we learned, for example, that you first initially have to pitch to 50% N1, then very rapidly to 70% N1, and then by 40 knots, you have to make sure that you've gone to MCT. And if you're above a 20 knot crosswind limit, then you have to make sure that you've pitched the control sticks fully forward. So that's what we got taught. We then, in this lesson, once we were airborne, we went through the different laws of the aircraft. So there's normal law, alternate law, direct law. We went through the different protections available. So you've got bipals for example, in normal law. In alternate law, you've only got high speed stability and low speed stability. And then we looked at, for example, direct law, when that will happen. For example, if you were in alternate law and once you put the landing gear then down, you will be in direct law. We then looked at mechanical backup. Now, mechanical backup is a situation that you'd wish that you're never in. This is when you can only use the rudders and the pitch trim to control the aircraft. It's very, very tricky to control the aircraft. You really wouldn't want to be in a situation like this, but it is there if you ever lost pretty much everything in the aircraft. Then we consolidated also on the raw data ILS that we'd practiced the previous day. So we did a couple of more approaches. And then we did a couple of crosswind landing techniques. So we did the crabbing technique of where you're pointing towards the wind. And then obviously once you're at 30 fleet roughly and you're flaring, you want to make sure that you then correct yourself and you center yourself with the center line. This was a bit challenging, but we got through it. We did it a couple of attempts, and that was Sim 2. So I completed that yesterday. So I've done 3 days of simulators now, and I've now got 3 days off. And in these next 3 days, I'm just going to be revising and practicing for the next 3 sessions. That's pretty much it. So I will probably update you guys next once I've completed simulator 3, 4, and 5. So yeah, that's it for now, and I'll update you very soon. Hi everyone, just thought I'd give you a quick update. So last time I spoke to you was after I've done my pre-sim and then Sim 1 and Sim 2. So I've just completed in the last 3 days Sim 3, Sim 4 and Sim 5. So I just thought I would quickly go through of what the different things that we did. So for Simulator 3, the simulator was positioned at the gate on stand, and it was a cold and dark start, and it basically gave us a chance to do the whole cockpit preparation checklist once again, so with engines and everything switched off, so that we could consolidate on what we had previously learned, and so that our SOPs are to a good standard really. After doing that, we obviously did the usual taxiing, took off, and we basically did a couple of memory items. So we did EGWPS, so Enhanced Ground Proximity Warning System. So this is, for example, if you've got, for example, terrain ahead of you, and it's closing in very quickly, and you would obviously need to climb away at a very high angle of attack. So for example, you'd obviously switch the autopilot off, and you'd obviously pull the control column, the side stick fully aft, so that you can climb away at a high angle of attack. Then we also did a TCAS. So TCAS is traffic collision avoidance system. So this is when there is an aircraft in the vicinity of you, and most likely 2 aircrafts will most likely collide. This is when you need to take evasive actions and disconnect the autopilot and basically follow the green zone. So on the PFD, you will see on the VSI, the vertical speed indicator, the rate at which you need to either climb, descend, or stay level to avoid an oncoming aircraft. Then we looked at diversions and how we would divert, how we can program that into the McDo, how we can, for example, speak to ATC, let them know what our intentions are. After doing this, we basically focused at circling approaches. So circling approaches are approaches which where you basically use both sides of the runway. So for example, let's say at Gatwick on runway 08, the ILS is inoperative, so you can't come down on the ILS. What you can potentially do is you can come down to circuit altitude using the ILS for runway 26, and then you can veer off at a 45-degree intercept, go outbound parallel with the runway, and then basically do a circuit to land. This is mostly used, for example, if you've got poor weather and use the ILS to descend below the cloud base, and then obviously, as I previously mentioned, you do the circling approach to come into land. This is where you use track FPA, and on the ILS itself, you would basically configure with flap 3 gear down, and then once you're basically doing you're turning onto final, you would put your flap full down, do the landing checklist, and come into land. So yeah, we did that a couple of times. That was quite interesting. Had a lot of fun. It's very procedural. Make sure that you know your 45-degree intercept headings or tracks, for example, your parallel to the runway tracks, and what the reciprocal of that would be. And then we practiced some landings, and this is quite interesting, the simulator, because when I was flying the aircraft, we basically did a pilot in cap. So this is when, for example, the instructor from behind had told my sim partner to act almost dead and not be responsive when I asked him to pop flap 2 out. So obviously, if your pilot's, for example, not paying attention or I guess unresponsive in a situation, obviously they could be having a heart attack, they could be having seizure. So you need to obviously fly, navigate, communicate. It's important that you take control of the aircraft and you don't, I guess, get too worried about your colleague, as it may sound quite rude, but the priority is to fly the aircraft. You've got obviously X amount of souls behind you, and it's important to take care of the aircraft. So you realize that your workload starts increasing. So now you've got to fly the aircraft, but you've also got to do the pilot monitoring duties, where you would, for example, put flaps 2 out. You would see if the speed is safe and putting the gear down, doing, for example, the landing checklist. So I realized that my workload had really increased when you don't have someone. But it actually does happen quite often that pilots in cap and you have to basically take control and basically do both roles and responsibilities. So yeah, that was Simulator 3. For Simulator 4, yep, we did a typical takeoff, and what we were really focusing in this lesson is engine failure. So we were looking at engine failures at cruise altitude and trying to relight it. So what we saw is when you've got engine failure, let's say at flight level 370, you can't stay there with one engine only. So you kind of have to drift down to the engine out maximum level. You can find this in the progress page and see what the maximum altitude for one engine is, and then you'll try and relight the engine. We also then looked at the electrical emergency configuration. So this is literally when you've pretty much lost all the power, all the generators in the aircraft, and it's quite a scary situation, because you're pilot flying on the right hand seat in a simulator, and then all of a sudden all your screens go completely dark, completely blank, and then all the the displays are now put on only on the captain's side. So you are initially flying, now your partner who was pilot monitoring, they have to fly. So you then obviously do the ECAM drills. There's a lot to do. It's really important in the situation that you stay calm and collective. There is a lot going on in that moment in time, so make sure you do the ECAM drills very smoothly, declare a mayday, and try and divert to the closest suitable airport. We then focus on 2D approaches. We did the non-precision approaches. So for example, we were doing the 3-2-1 minus 0.3 method. For those of you who don't know what that is, you guys can Google it up. It's just a type of approach when, for example, you've only got the localizer available and you don't have the glide slope. So you're manually having to change your vertical speed. So maybe you're descending down at 700 feet per minute, and then you have to tweak it if you're high or low on the glide slope. So you have it on your Lido or Jeppesen plate at different nautical miles away from the threshold of the runway, at what altitude you need to be at. So if you're, for example, 30 feet too high, you have to adjust it on the track, on the vertical speed indicator, and kind of wind it down. So your track angle, if it was a normal glide slope coming down at 3 degrees, you'll now have to adjust it to 3.3 degrees. We then, at the end of the session, looked at RTOs and evacuations. So the aircraft was then repositioned on the runway, and the instructor basically gave us a couple of rejected takeoffs. So he did a all the rejected takeoffs were before V1. So initially what happened is you hear a loud bang, and I'm in the pilot monitoring seat, so I'm acting as the pretend captain. And let's say you've had an engine failure before V1, so your actions would be you shout stop. You then close the thrust levers, put max reverse on. Once you've put max reverse on, make sure that you can see that the aircraft is decelerating, it's slowing down, and then you obviously bring the aircraft to a complete stop, put the parking brake on. You will say attention correct stations. The first officer seat, who was initially pilot flying, he would have make sure that he's had reverse green, decel, and then once the aircraft has come to a complete stop, he will inform ATC that you say whatever your company call sign is, and you'd say stopping on runway, for example. And then potentially what we did we did the evacuation checklist. So let's say you have engine fire and the engine is fire has not extinguished. So you basically run through the ECAM actions, and the ECAM will then lead you to potentially do the evacuation checklist. This can be found in the QRH. So yeah, that was a lot of fun. So the next lesson we had Sim 5. Sim 5 for me, I would say, was definitely the most difficult simulator session that we've done so far. I know every lesson it was going to get progressively harder. I felt that this was quite a big jump and step. There was so much going on. It was quite overwhelming. But obviously there was so much to learn from it. So we were at the stand, we did the transit cockpit preparation, and we'd found out that our radio altimeter 2 was had a fault. So it came up on the ECAM as RA2 fault, RADALT 2 fault. So you basically look at the MEO on the QRH, you can see that there's obviously 2 radio altimeters, and that you can take off with 1 radio altimeter. So it's just so that you have situational awareness of what's going on. Then while we were taxiing, we had a FMGS1 failure. Now the FMGS1 failure, you also have to go into the QRH, go under the computer resets table, and you have to follow the procedure. So on the overhead panel, there's a CB, a circuit breaker, that you literally need to just pull, wait 5 seconds and push back in. And if the ECAM notification basically disappears, that means that the situation was resolved and you could basically go flying. So yeah, we did that and it disappeared, so everything was good. And then Simulator 5, we for this session, we also did an engine failure during the climb. So we actually have to control, we had engine failure and you actually have to control the aircraft. So obviously there's a huge change in yaw moment. You obviously you were probably on you're on flex MCT, you'd probably push a toga because you're climbing, so you want the extra power of the aircraft, put in the rudder. Yeah, so we did that. I thought we did that okay, that wasn't too bad. But the next thing I found quite difficult, we had a dual hydraulic failure, right? So the dual hydraulic failure, the worst you could lose is losing the green system and the yellow system. If you've lost that, you're pretty badly screwed. It's going to be a very, very long day. You've lost most of your, I guess, most of your system, nose wheel system, flaps, slats, rudder, aileron. You've lost a lot. So it's a very, very long ECAM action that you have to do, followed by you have to go into the QRH and you have to look at the summary for a dual hydraulic failure, and you basically look at what things are available to you. You will definitely be in alternate law, so you've lost most of your protections. You would only have some certain stabilities, and obviously once you put the gear down, you're in direct law, so things become very, very challenging. And then after we practiced this, we basically did so the instructor basically reset the simulator and reset all the failures. We then did a smoke in cockpit procedure. So we were initially at, let's say, I think flight level 350, and the simulator in the simulator there was smoke, and it's obviously very stressful seeing smoke in the simulator. And obviously in the real flight you would never want for that to happen. So if you ever see smoke in the cockpit, the first thing you want to do is you want to first put the oxygen mask on straight away. You want to put the oxygen mask on, make sure both of you guys have put it on, and the first thing you really want to do is start a descent. You want to start a descent, and you want to think about, right, why has this potentially happened? What can we do? You want to look at, for example, the nearest suitable airfields around you. You want to look at what checklists you can do. So there's the smoke in cockpit checklist that is on the EQRH that you can do. There's also a smoke removal procedure that can be done. Yeah, there's a lot of things happening. It's very, very intense. You are descending at VMO. You want to get down there the quickest. You've probably got speed brakes out. You've probably spoken to ATC. You've declared a mayday. You've probably initially descended down to flight level 100, and then you've requested requested further descent down to, I don't know, platform altitude, for example, at the most suitable airport. So there's a lot going on. You obviously need to tell cabin crew, and you probably do an attention crew at station so that they're aware, because they're probably your in crews. They're thinking, why are you descending so early? You've got this amount of time left, so what's happened? So there's a lot going on. Try and get rid of the smoke if you can with the removal procedure. If you can't, then obviously think about landing ASAP, and then obviously tell ATC that you've got smoke and you don't know if there's a fire on board, yes or no, or it can lead to a fire potentially. So you definitely want to potentially do either definitely more than you want to do a precautionary landing, but you definitely would want to do an emergency evacuation landing as well. So tell, for example, ATC that you want the fire crew to meet you on the runway in case anything was to happen. And then we obviously, the previous day we did the evacuation on the runway procedure. Then we repeated that again today. We repeated that again for this simulator. So yeah, I felt like this session, Sim 5, there was a lot going on. There was a lot of challenges. You had to think on your feet of what to do next, and what would be the next best choice of action, really. Yeah, so far I thought all the simulator sessions were kind of easy, or even if it was difficult, it was manageable. This one was very overwhelming, but yeah, we got through it. It wasn't too bad. I understand that as each simulator session is now going to go on, it's going to get harder and harder, but yeah, we're here to learn. We're here to do the type rating. So yeah, now I've got another 3 days off. Next time I update you, I would probably have done simulator 6, 7, and 8. So until then, yeah, that's it. Hi everyone, I hope you're well. It's been a while since I've last updated you guys. So last time I updated you, I finished Sim 5, and I told you I was going to update you for Sim 6, 7, and 8. Unfortunately, I've been really busy with work and revision and everything. And I've skipped ahead a couple more simulator sessions, and I'm all the way up to Sim 10. So today I'll go through all the updates for Sim 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. So let's start with Sim 6. So Sim 6 was a pretty fun lesson, actually. It was the first flight that we were in full motion since the pre-sim, and we did an RNAV SID using the GPS. And then we did a bit when we got to cruise altitude, and the instructor had given us some UPRT, so upset prevention recovery training. So this is when the aircraft is either nose high or nose low, with attitudes with basically banking to the left or banking to the right, and you have to take evasive actions to try and bring it into a neutral/normal position. So if you've got nose high, you'd call nose high, and obviously you make sure you'd push the aircraft forward, make sure then you've rolled your wings level and add thrust as required. And if you've got nose low tendency, then make sure you roll the wings level first, then you slowly pull up and add the thrust in. But the actual actions, in terms of memory actions, is firstly, autopilot, make sure that you switched off, auto thrust off, pitch as required, thrust as required, and roll as required, really. So that's UPRT. That was pretty good. And the way the instructor did it is at the back, he would freeze the simulator first, he would press a button, and he would get us into these weird attitudes and positions, and then he would unfreeze the sim, and then you would have to obviously take the action. So after doing UPRT, we went and focused on stalling. So stalling was pretty fun as well. So the correct actions when you have a stall is stall, I have control. Make sure you hold down the priority button on the side stick, pitch forward, and then obviously recover. Make sure your wings are level, and then add the thrust in gently. You don't want to have too much thrust in, because imagine you've put toga in and then now you're climbing a crazy VSI. And then obviously now you've got another stall to deal with, so that's the last thing you want to do. And then we did an RNAV star, and we did a localizer only using the 321 0.3 technique, which is basically early stabilize using the bird. And then we went and did a bit of bulk landing. So what is bulk landing? Bulk landing is when you're very close to the ground and you're just about to touch down, and for some reason, let's say ATC have told you to go around, or you feel like you're not stable, the captain usually in most airlines will take control and fly the go around. So the correct procedure is I have control, toga, pitch up to 15.5 degrees nose up, and then once you're safely off the ground, make sure that you can then ask for go around flaps and gear up. The reason once you're safely off the ground is because obviously you don't want to have a tail strike when you're asking for, let's say, go around flaps, as it could potentially cause more drag. So that's why once you're safely off the ground and you deem it safe, then you can ask for that from your pilot monitoring. So we did the bulk landing, technically to go around, came back for radar vectors, and then the instructor basically increased the gross weight of the aircraft. So now we need to do an overweight landing. So for the overweight landing, there's a procedure that you need to go through in the EQRH. So in the EQRH for the overweight landing, what it says is that you need to increase your flare height. And the reason why you want to increase your flare height is because potentially you were probably flaring at 30 feet off the ground. Now that you're heavy and you've got a lot of momentum, you want to increase your flare height potentially to 40, 50, and then flare, and then so that it's a more gradual impact onto the ground so that you don't have a very hard landing. I guess once you've landed, make sure you probably put max reverse on straight away, because obviously you're very heavy and you want to make sure you stop within the runway, and then put brakes as required. And then I guess once you're probably taxiing off the runway, probably put your brake fans off if equipped on the Airbus. So yeah, did overweight landing, and then he repositioned us again on final. We did a raw data ILS to land, and then once we landed, obviously pilot monitoring has duties to call out, for example, spoilers, reverse green, and decel. So the aircraft is actually decelerating and slowing down, but there was no decel. So the pilot monitoring called out no decel. That's time for you to obviously apply, as a pilot flying, manual braking. If you realize there's no manual braking, then you need to call loss of braking. So in that situation, that's what happened. I tried to use the brakes. There was no brake working, so I called out loss of braking. I then put maximum reverse thrust, so close thrust levers obviously before, max reverse straight away, and then you ask for anti-skid off, because obviously you're flying, you're doing a lot of things. You ask pilot monitoring to switch the anti-skid off, and then you apply a maximum of 1000 psi, and then you do the parking brake as required. So you don't want to put the parking brake on and leave it there. You want to do on off as required, basically. And then pilot monitoring has a responsibility of giving the call sign to ATC and just saying loss of braking, stopping on runway, stand by. So yeah, that was Sim 6. I thought Sim 6 was a pretty nice, fun lesson. We then moved on to Sim 7. So Sim 7, we did the usual startup from the stand, taxi to the holding point, and then once we were on the runway, we got a couple of FRTOs after V1 with no damage. So you would hear a huge bang after V1, and then you feel the simulator have a huge yawing moment. You need to obviously recover it with the rudders. So put amount of rudder pressure, center it in with the runway center line, or parallel, I guess, and then take the problem into the air and deal with it. So it's really important that you fly, navigate, communicate in the situation. So fly the aircraft below 400 feet, no ECAM actions, call positive, climb gear up, and then after passing 400 feet, pilot flying will probably just ask for confirm the failure. They would say, right, we've had an engine 2 failure potentially, and then you can ask for, right, are there any OEBs? No OEBs, my radios, ECAM actions, and pilot monitoring can crack on with the ECAM actions. Make sure that then the engine is secured, and once the engine is secured, you can push to level off. Once you've pushed the level off, you can activate the secondary flight plan so that you can fly the engine out SID, and then obviously push the nav button so you can fly the engine out SID. And then once you're at green dot speed, you can then pull the altitude bug so you can get the climb going again. So we did it a couple of times so that we understand the actions that we have to take if you have an engine failure after V1. So if you have an engine failure after V1, that's probably one of the worst things that you can have, because there's so much going on, I guess. So we did a couple of those, and then we did an engine failure after V1 with damage. So this is when, right, the engine potentially is come off and there's a lot of damage, it's not windmilling, nothing, and obviously you've switched down you've closed the engine down. It's pretty much the same procedure, but yeah, after we completed that, we ran through a TDODA, and then we decided that we needed to do a single engine ILS to land. So we did a single engine ILS manually flown, as in with auto thrust still engaged, but no autopilot and flight directors still intact. After that, we did a single engine go around. After we did the single engine go around, because we did that because we weren't visual with the runway, we got vectored again and came back for a single engine landing. So yeah, that was a pretty nice lesson. It was mainly focused on single engine techniques and handling. But yeah, really good. So then we moved on to Sim 8. So for Sim 8, we obviously did the performance calculations in the briefing room. We briefed with the instructor, made sure that we knew what we were going to do, jumped in the sim, we were at the stand, put in all our V-speeds, got to the taxiway, got to the holding point, and then we're ready for takeoff. So on the takeoff itself, we got a wind shear. Now you may ask, what is a wind shear? So wind shear is basically a variation in speed, wind speed and direction. So the aircraft feels very unstable and the aircraft speed is also fluctuating quite significantly. In this situation, you feel like you don't actually have control of the aircraft. And normally it's really good airmanship for previous planes that have just taken off or on an approach to report of wind shear, so that the people that are flying next, they can have an estimated guess of that something could potentially come up. So in the event of wind shear, what do you need to do? So it's a memory item. You say wind shear, toga, so you apply toga power. You then keep the autopilot on, you follow SRS, and you don't change config. The reason you don't change config is because if you change your config, what's most likely going to happen is going to cause more drag, it's going to slow you down, and you'll drop below VLS. So that's the last thing you want to do. You just want to get it going, really, with speed increasing as you're so close to VLS potentially. And then pilot monitoring, he's got some action/responsibilities that he needs to do. So he's going to look at his PFD and he's going to call out things like, all right, speed stable, speed's decreasing, speed's increasing, speed's fluctuating. And then you can say that, okay, no, you've got positive climb, okay. And then once you're out of wind shear, then you can then ask for gear flaps or go around, or gear up potentially. You don't want to do this while in wind shear because obviously, as previously mentioned. Right, after that, we got to the cruise and we did an emergency descent. So we had a cabin pressure failure where the cabin pressure was rising very, very quickly, and it came up on the lower DU, and our immediate action is obviously call emergency descent, put the oxygen mask on. Once you've got the oxygen mask on, start a descent straight away. So as pilot flying, you want to just get going down. Pilot monitoring will obviously tell ATC, mayday, mayday, mayday. Emergency descent, descending to flight level 100 initially. And then you'll do an attention crew at stations so that the cabin crew know that obviously something's not right, because maybe you've got another 4 hours into your journey and they're going to think, why are we descending already? So it's just so that they have a bit of situational awareness of, oh, potentially something's not right. Once you've done all this on the descent, fine tune your speed. If you've got no damage, descend down at VMO. If you've got damage, just stay at your current speed. Then obviously go into the MIC2, look for the closest airports, run through a TDODA potentially with your sim partner if they've got the capacity, and say, right, this is what's happened. Where do you think we can descend? Where do you think we can divert to? And look at those options. It's very, very similar to the smoke procedure that we mentioned previously in Sim 5. And then we did... then the instructor basically reset all the failures and malfunctions, and we were just normal aircraft. And then we were cleared we were just doing an ILS to land, but the instructor only cleared us for the localizer. So what we were trying to aim to do in this lesson was to capture the glide slope from above. So as I mentioned, imagine you're on the localizer and they've only cleared you for the localizer and they haven't told you you've been cleared for the glide slope. Now you're technically quite high. So now you've been cleared for the glide slope. The first thing you do is select the approach push button, and then you go to the speed, you go to the altitude bug, and you'll select a higher altitude than the aircraft, and then you'll go into the VSI and you will change it, your vertical speed, and you'll change it to minus 1,000 feet per minute up to minus 2,000 feet per minute, so that the aircraft can go and intercept the glide slope. So this is really good, obviously, when ATC has left you really high and really late and you need to intercept it. So we did that, and on the approach we did a wind shear on approach. So it's it's basically the same thing as wind shear on takeoff, but wind shear on go around, just say wind shear toga. As previously mentioned, don't change config. Once you are clearly out of wind shear, then you can ask for go around flaps and then positive climb, gear up, all of that. And then on the go around itself, we got an engine failure. So we got an engine failure and we had to deal with all the ECAM actions and responsibilities. After doing that, we came in for a single engine ILS to land. So yeah, that was Sim 8 for you. Moving on to Sim 9. Sim 9 was a different, so far it was the most different sort of simulator session we've had. So it was split into two parts. So My sim partner, he was flying first and he had the loft section of the flight. And then I, going second after 2 hours, I went through the unreliable speed and circling approaches. So yeah, we'll start with my sim partner. So we basically had a loft flight, which is a line orientated flight training. So this is where the instructor is going to throw at you loads and loads of failures, and they want to see how you can deal with it. So we were initially doing, got in and we were at the stand and we were just doing a transit check. And we got an MEL item. We got a pack 1 fail come up on the ECAM. So what my responsibility was is, as pilot monitoring, was to go into the QRH, go into the MEL section, and then have a look in there and look to see how many packs we've got. So we've obviously got 2 packs, and it says that you can take off with 1 pack in up. So we were happy to take off. Then on taxiing, we got a flight control ELAC 1 fault. So this one, you go to the QRH and then you do look at the computer resets, and usually it's pulling a CB or something. So yeah, that was pretty straightforward and simple. And then my sim partner obviously took off, and then he got a TCAS. He got a TCAS on the takeoff itself. So obviously he had to take evasive actions and maneuver away from the aircraft. And then after the TCAS, once he had leveled off, he'd got a dual auto thrust failure. So the auto thrust wasn't working and it was non-recoverable. And for the remainder of the flight, he had to technically fly manually. So then, because we had dual auto thrust and it was non-recoverable, my sim partner had to land with autopilot off, auto thrust off, flight directors off, and it was basically raw data ILS to land. So yeah, that was pretty eventful. And then obviously it was me then flying next after 2 hours, and I did the usual takeoff. We did some of the failures, didn't do all of them as we've obviously previously experienced it, but the brand new one I got was the unreliable speed, and I got the unreliable speed at cruise. So the unreliable speed is when your speed indicator isn't matching with your sim partner's one or on the standby instrument. Now this is really, really dangerous, because if you can imagine, if you don't know your speed, you can potentially be overspeeding the aircraft, the flaps, or your speed could be so low where you could potentially go into a stall. So the first thing, once you realize you've got an unreliable speed, and the way you're going to realize this is there might be like a red X on the speed tape, so you know it's not functioning, or it's saying something really, really weird, like if you're in cruise and it's only giving you 100 knots, something ridiculous. But the first thing you need to do is the memory item. So you call out unreliable speed, you switch your autopilot, flight directors, and auto thrust off. If you're between 0 feet and thrust reduction altitude, you put toga 15. So you put toga power and you pitch up to 15 degrees nose up. If you're at thrust reduction to 10,000 feet or flight level 100, you put climb 5. So on the thrust, you put to the climb D10 and you pitch up to 10 degrees nose up. If, however, you are above flight level 100, what you'll do is you'll put climb 5. So make sure you're still back in the climb D10 and you're pitching up at 5 degrees nose up. After doing all this, if you had flaps 0, 1, 2, 3, you want to keep the flap configuration. If you had flap full configuration, then you want to change it back down to flap 3. You would try and retract the speed brakes and the gear. And then obviously you look into the QRH for the unreliable speed procedure. Now, once you're doing this, you will realize that you need to look at different power and pitch attitudes, and this will obviously depend on the weight, config, and altitude of the aircraft. Then you're going to look at, for example, now you're going to descend, right? What pitch attitudes or power state do I need to be on? Okay, now we're going to come down on the approach. So it's quite a long procedure that you have to do. Make sure that you treat it very importantly as if you don't have a reliable speed, it's really, really unsafe. So it's really important you do it correctly. And then after you've done after we did the unreliable speed, we then did a circling approach. So circling approach, we last did in Sim 3. So it's been a while, but it was really, really nice that we came back to it. I felt quite confident while doing it, and we just did a circling approach at Gatwick on ILS 26 left to land on 08 right. So yeah, that was pretty much it. That was Sim 9 done for you. And then we move on to Sim 10, so the last sim I just done. So right, Sim 10, it was basically a mock LST flight. So the instructor in the briefing room said, right guys, we're gonna do a mock LST, and there's some sign-off items which I'm gonna throw at you once we've reached cruise, and we're gonna have to do them. So yeah, this mock LST was I think a good indication of what to expect potentially. Obviously I've got to do the LST tomorrow, so yeah, it was good that we got it done. So we did the usual setup, all the performance, all of that.
got to the holding point, ready for takeoff, ready for departure, sorry, and then took off into the air. And as soon as I was flying, we got engine failure after takeoff. So after V1, engine failure, and then obviously we had to control the aircraft, take it into the air, do the ECAM actions and drills, and secure the engine, run through the T-Doda, all of that really. And then after doing the FATO, he basically reset everything. So we had 2 engines now. And then he then repositioned us for a normal takeoff. Again, we did the takeoff, but while in the takeoff, we got a flaps and slats fault after takeoff. So this is when the flap or slats is, I guess, jammed and locked, and it doesn't want to change position. And because the aircraft is in managed speed, the aircraft will automatically overspeed the flaps, which is your VFE, your maximum speed with flaps extended. So what you want to do initially straight away is pull speed so you can manually tune the speed itself. So we got this, and then we leveled off, and we were thinking about different things, right? So there is a flaps and slats landing QRH checklist that you could do. So we had a look at this, and we were looking at the different speeds that we need to be at. So that was that done. But while we were doing this, we then got another failure, which was a dual rad out fault. So this means both your radio altimeters aren't working, so you're not going to get any auto calls. So you're not going to get your 50, 40, 30 retard, none of that at all. You're not going to get the 2500 call, and you're going to have no GPWS. So for example, if there's terrain ahead of you, obviously GPWS would come alive, and it will tell you to pull up. However, that's something that was not available as well. And once you're in normal, obviously you're flying in normal law, if you were to put the gear down, you'll go straight from normal law to direct law, which will make the aircraft very, very difficult to fly. So me and my sim partner, we basically briefed how we're going to fly the approach. We went through the QRH. We said that this is the speeds that we need to be at, and this is what we're expecting. So it'll be very hard to control in direct law. So yeah, that was pretty much it. And then we came in, landed off that, and then he repositioned us at cruise altitude again, and then he gave us a jammed stabilizer fault. So the jammed stabilizer fault, obviously it's jammed, and then you need to follow the same QRH procedure, get that done, and then we landed with an ILS to land. So yeah, that was Sim 10. We didn't have all the failures, we had some failures. It was a good insight of what to expect. So obviously now I've completed all the different simulator sessions, and my next one is LST. I'm feeling quite nervous. However, me and my sim partner have put a lot of work in. There's been a lot of revision. What's been really good about me and my sim partner, we've been able to communicate well. We've been able to go into the VFDs, practice all the different flows and procedures. It's really important that you do this so that once you jump in the simulator, you guys are all on the same page. Because if someone's revised and someone hasn't revised, this will be apparent in the simulator when you're doing the procedures and techniques, because the instructor's gonna be like, he's got no clue what he's doing, and this guy's gone home, done all his homework. I think I've been very lucky, and I've had a really good sim partner throughout my type rating. He's been really, really helpful. We go through everything. If we don't understand anything, we'll get a call, message each other. It's really important for type rating that you work together. The last thing is you want to have someone who doesn't want to help you. There's been scenarios when the 2 sim partners, they don't get along, and it's really unfortunate, but I definitely recommend you work together. So yeah, next time I will update you is when I've completed my LST.
Hi everyone. So yeah, today I had my LST, and thankfully I passed. So LST is basically a license skills test. For those of you that don't know, it's basically your practical exam for your aircraft, basically, so that you can get officially type rated on it. So yeah, I had my sim exam today at 6 a.m. So we meant to basically report 1.5 hours before. So we were meant to do a 4:30 a.m. start. So obviously that's quite early. So yeah, we got an email yesterday from our examiner, and he said to us, do you guys want to do a Zoom meeting the day before? So you can get in a bit later the next day. So yeah, we said, yeah, that'd be great. So we did a Zoom meeting. The examiner was really, really, really nice, absolute top guy. Made us feel at ease, made us feel comfortable. He basically gave us the route of what we were going to expect the next day today. He gave us the weather. He told us that he's going to give us 3 minor failures and 3 major failures. And he just said to kind of treat it like any other sim and not get too worried. He told us to have a good night's sleep, just be relaxed. So yeah, the next day, obviously, I drove into Gatwick to L3. We got there about 5 a.m. The instructor came, yeah, really, really chill guy, lots of jokes. Got into the simulator, so I was pilot monitoring first and my sim partner was flying first.
and I'll talk you through basically the LST exam. So my partner, he started with the cockpit cold and dark, so that's basically starting from stand, doing pushback, taxiing, getting to the holding point. So we took off from Gatwick on runway 26 left. We did the Lambourne 6 mic departure, which is basically climbing straight out, doing a 180 on yourself. So once we were wings level, he basically gave a TCAS fault. It's when there's an aircraft near you in approximately about 30 seconds within you, and you have to take evasive action to kind of maneuver away from the aircraft. So we got a TCAS initially, and then after we completed the TCAS, we got obviously our first major failure. We got an engine failure in the cruise. So I say cruise, but we were only at 4,000 feet. So obviously you need to fly, navigate, communicate. So we dealt with the plane first, so just flying the plane. We carried on navigating. We then communicated with ATC, declared a mayday. We then asked for a present position hold so we can finish off our ECAM drills. After completing all of that, we basically secured the engine, finished off the ECAM, and then did a TDODA. So we said how much fuel we had on board. We told them, right, we've had an engine 1 or 2 failure or a fire, and we've decided to divert back to Gatwick as we're in a very close vicinity. We then had to speak to ATC, find out the weather, see if it's suitable to land there. Then we did the landing distance procedure, see that if we can land back at Gatwick. After doing all that, we made the decision to divert back to Gatwick. Then we had different actions to do. So for example, you had to speak to ATC, let them know of our intentions. So we spoke to them, we told them that, right, we want to stay in the hold at the moment, so that we can set everything up, and we will let you know when we're ready. You basically then ask a senior member of cabin crew to come to the flight deck. Once they come, you basically do a NITS brief, so you state the nature of what's happened, your intentions, how long when you're gonna start the approach, special instructions, so you can probably say it's gonna be a precautionary landing or emergency landing, and then you basically speak to the passengers. So once you've done all that, you basically the pilot flying will then hand over control to pilot monitoring, and the person who was initially flying, he will basically go into the McDo, he will set everything up for the approach. Once you've done that, you then do an arrival briefing with your colleague, and you go through basically the chart, the procedure to go in the event of a go-around, what you would do, the threats that can potentially come up, so weather, anti-ice having on or off, things like this. So anyways, we came in around and we did an ILS 3D approach and single engine, and on the way down we basically had to do a go around because we weren't visual with the runway. So we did a single engine go around, and obviously single engine is a bit difficult to control the aircraft, so make sure you fly, navigate, communicate, and then we obviously follow the missed approach instructions, and we entered the hold at Willow. After that, we ran through another TDODA, and we basically went through what happened. So we said we weren't visual because the cloud base was really low, and we agreed that we'll do another approach in. So we did another approach and we landed at Gatwick basically, but this was a ILS 2D, so only LNAV. We came in, we landed, and basically the instructor then repositioned us at the holding point for another takeoff. So he repositioned us, and the weather, you could see, went really poor, and you couldn't see the end of the runway, and that was kind of a small clue to predict that we're going to get rejected takeoff. So obviously a rejected takeoff is if you have any sort of emergency or a failure before potentially V1 or even after V1, and you need to bring the aircraft to a complete stop. So if you had an engine failure or some sort of fire or a problem before V1, you'll bring the aircraft to a complete stop. And obviously if you had something after V1, you have to obviously take it into the air. So we got a rejected takeoff, and in this situation, pilot monitoring does most of the responsibilities. So you basically shout stop, you close the thrust levers, and you put max reverse on. Pilot who was initially pilot flying, he will now basically say reverse green, decel, so the aircraft is decelerating. Then you'll just monitor that if the aircraft is actually slowing down, or if you need to manual braking, or if you need to do the loss of braking procedure. After you've done all this, once you've come to a complete stop, put the parking brake on, see if you need to do the evacuation checklist. The instructor had then basically repositioned us again for another takeoff. In this scenario, he actually gave an engine failure after takeoff. So as soon as V1 happened, he basically gave us engine failure. So obviously you have a huge yaw change. You need to control the aircraft, then take it into the sky, deal with it. So you need to put a lot of rudder in. Once you start climbing, start pitching up to about 12.5 degrees, put the rudder trim in, and then until 400 feet, no ECAM actions, and then probably pull heading. Once you've done all of that, you do your ECAM actions, make sure you reach your engine altitude, make sure the engine is secured, and then you can push the level off, finish off the ECAM, declare a mayday to ATC, say attention crew at station, so cabin crew is alerted, and then follow the engine out SID, and then basically run a DODA and say, right, this is the problem we had. But as we previously demonstrated an engine failure ECAM drill, as soon as engine was secure, the instructor said, yep, that's enough, that's fine. He then repositioned us for a raw data ILS. So you have no flight directors, you've got track FPA, and then it's up to the instructor if they're going to give you auto thrust or not. Autopilot is switched off. So you fly it down manually, and we landed off that. And then we got a loss of braking. So you need to do the loss of braking procedure. That's in a nutshell is basically your LST. Obviously, Leif, my sim partner, went first, then I went second, and I did this as well. There's other things that can come up. You can get EGWPS. So obviously, if you've got like terrain ahead, you need to do the procedure to obviously maneuver away from terrain. So there's that one. You may have to do a stall at takeoff, wind shear. There's emergency descent. Emergency descent's quite a long drill to do, so you probably won't get that for your LST. You can get a dual hydraulic failure, but however, it's really unlikely you're going to get this for your LST. The LST is an exam where they don't want to see perfection, but they want to see that if you've got a very good level of training and understanding, and if you can basically perform all these actions to a good standard, really. That went well, and at the end of the session, the instructor told us that we'd both passed, so we were absolutely delighted. There was paperwork that I needed to get done. So in a nutshell, that is your LST. Obviously, we were very, very worried building up to the LST. Sleepless nights, a lot of revision, a lot of work, but I had a really, really good sim partner. He made me feel at ease. We did a lot of work together, a lot of hours revising, going into the flat panel, practicing all our flows. But it's really important for type rating in general that you know all your memory actions, because you don't want to waste time of thinking, oh, what do I have to do there? It should come naturally. And obviously at the same time, you need to be doing your SOPs. So it's been an event for almost 6 weeks, but thankfully it's come to an end. So really happy that I managed to also do my type rating at L3Harris. Most of the instructors that we had were from our company, and it was really good as they followed our SOPs. The instructors were absolutely brilliant. Some of them just were amazing. They're captains with 20, 30 years experience. Some of them are retired. Some of them do this full time. Some are part time. Some are on the line. So we had really good insight and exposure to our company, what to expect. I have to say, this type rating, the sim training here at L3Harris was absolutely amazing. Top notch. It was just brilliant, high standards. I think you'll be really lucky if you can do your type rating at L3. Also, the facilities at L3 are really good. Obviously, you've got the flat panel, you've got the VFD, which is basically the flat panel with, manual thrust levers, so you can actually push the thrust levers forward. You've got control sticks, and you can actually get the aircraft airborne. So that's really good. Obviously, you've got the simulators as well itself. These are really, really good simulators. Very realistic, full motion, really, really good. So overall, type rating itself, it was definitely challenging, I have to say. Obviously, the first 2 weeks is quite intense, where you're learning all the systems of the aircraft, learning how they operate, understanding everything behind it. And then you've got to do a lot of preparation for your exam. Then once the sim starts, obviously, you've got 3 days on, 3 days off, roughly. And obviously you get time in between to obviously revise for your next 3 lessons ahead. But it's a very intensive course. You're definitely sleep deprived. Don't have time to, socialize with friends and family. but just remember it's just a small duration time, and in the long run it will definitely pay off. So my advice is for anyone that's got LST coming up, just put your 100% amount of work into it, and once you're done, you can relax, be stress-free, and yeah, that's pretty much it. I just would like to round off this by saying, thank you for watching my video. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and stay tuned for more.